Welcome to the Curriculum Toolkit video, Finding the Why of Curriculum Rationale 2, Liberating Learning, Igniting Joy and Determining Mastery Toolkit. This video provides support for colleagues wishing to engage with staff as part of the first phase of Curriculum Rationale, Empathise and Define. Throughout these videos, I'll be referring to key ideas and toolkits. To find out more about these, go back to the video Finding the Why of Curriculum Rationale Session 1. These videos have been designed to accompany the resources available on the EduHub and are aimed at school leaders for professional learning. However, the EduHub versions are ready for use with staff teams and can be downloaded and adapted for this purpose. We're going to start then by looking at Liberating Learning, Igniting Joy. The two headings of this first section are taken from educationalist Santiago Ricon Gallardo and from the Education Scotland Curriculum Innovation Team. Through the following slides, we'll explore the idea of liberating learning and helping our young people find joy in learning. However, we should also be clear in covering this topic, we're of course talking about learning and teaching, as well as curriculum. In doing so, we should continue to consider the key principles which underpin our East Lothian sales and the key features of high quality learning and teaching. The first task is designed to support staff in taking a learning empathy walk and ask teachers to reflect on their experiences as learners. As teachers, we are lifelong learners. But how often do we place ourselves in learners' shoes by taking on new learning which might be out with our comfort zone? Or how much do we reflect on the features that support us to learn at our best? This task asks colleagues to map out their learning experience and leads them to determining their because. The task aims to support both the thinking around the learning experience, but also what ignites joy in us as learners. Part 2 moves staff on to self-reflection. Having carried out an empathy walk, thinking about our own reflections on learning, do colleagues see these features reflected in their own classrooms and their practice? How much does this reflect the how of learners in their classes? Following the personal reflection, encourage colleagues to share their reflections. In doing so, a diverse range of motivators for joy should promote consideration of how to ignite joy within a class of diverse learners. We know learners learn best when conditions are right. The learning task meets an individual's needs. In thinking about learning skills, as well as gathering pupil feedback on a topic, consider how this task might work with learners. How learning literate are our learners? How self-aware are they about how they learn best? And how much do you or your staff members know about what ignites learning in each young person? Gather this feedback as you will want to use this when considering how this is recognised and supported in the design of your curriculum rationale. This next task is very simple. Using the double-sided handout, What Really Matters to Us, cut the headings into strips with a set for each member of staff. Ask colleagues to order these by importance, as described in the slide. Reassure colleagues this is not a high-stakes task, but rather it's about evaluating what is important to us all. Once the time is up and everyone has made a decision, share this slide. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is a well-established theory and is widely used. Open the room for discussion and invite colleagues to feed back agreements or surprises or challenges coming out from this. Key to consideration for us as teachers is that self-actualization, and by that I mean learning, is at the very top. This should be interpreted carefully. Learning is not at the top of an importance list. Rather, every other need is foundational to learning. If our basic needs are not being met, we will not be able to fully engage. Our psychological needs. If our psychological needs are not being met, we will not be able to realize our self-fulfillment needs. Unless every other need is being met, the foundations that support learning will remain very shaky. Think about that young person who you taught that was determined to gain their peers' approval by clowning around. Were they seeking belonging and esteem? Consider the young person who you know does not feel safe, or who is not having their basic physiological needs met. What is their commitment to learning? These are hard and complex questions, but important ones when we're considering liberating learning and finding joy. Referring back to our learning sales, enabling learning and caring relationships can support this. Our schools and classrooms can provide some element of the needs of our young people. Let's now think about how we can ignite joy in learning. Firstly, let's consider what matters to our learners. This task invites us to think about what is important. CFE allows some autonomy for how we plan a curriculum. This task takes us on another empathy walk, this time asking colleagues to consider what may be important to different members of the school community. This is not intended to provide a definitive answer to what should be in your curriculum. Rather, the task is intended to invite consideration of how different values may exist, and, particularly for young people, what they might feel is the most important for them to be in their curriculum. To repeat the quote from the last slide, learning is the process and result of making sense of questions that matter to us. This task can be very powerful if we're alongside engagement with pupils, parents, and the wider community. This could form part of a consultation to inform your curriculum rationale. Whilst the format may not be appropriate, I will invite you to consider how this might work best for your school context. This is a good point to reflect on the four contexts of learning. You will remember this is the what of the national framework, and our curriculum rationale should take account of all four curriculum contexts. Dr. Geir Grau is a renowned figure in the field of education. Pause the video now to allow some time to read his words on screen. Dr. Grau's research has shown that our children are as affected by stereotypes which society creates. He explains that all stereotypes are set by age 4. It might be younger, but we just don't have the data for that. As schools, we have an opportunity to provide inspiration to aspiration. He is also clear that there is schooling and there is education. These are not the same thing. We need to ensure our schools are the rich, fertile spaces for growing aspiration through liberating learning and igniting joy in every young person. We can begin to pull together the threads of our thinking and consider how aspects of our curriculum can be liberating learning and igniting joy, or have the potential to limit learning or stifle motivation and engagement. We know young people are affected by stereotypes from a very young age. We can think of this in the context of needs, particularly belonging and self-esteem. If a young person cannot see themselves in your curriculum and does not see the potential opportunity for themselves, will they go on to engage, aspire, and have their learning ignited? Identity really does matter. This quote from Andy Hargreaves is very challenging for schools, but it is evidenced in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Let's move on to consider this from a different angle. This is Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. You may wish to pause the video to read this more carefully. Depending upon the age range you have within your school, you will wish to consider different features of the psychosocial development. However, let's look at ages 6 to 11 first. Erikson describes this as industry versus inferiority. He says, children learning the pleasure of applying themselves to tasks, or they feel inferior. Does that feel familiar? Can you see a young person whose joy has been ignited by successfully demonstrating learning? Can you also see a young person feeling inferior as they are not meeting the levels being achieved by their peers? The next stage frames this as identity versus confusion. This is broadly the teenage years. Teenagers work at refining a sense of self by testing roles and then integrating them to form a single identity. Or they become confused about who they are. Think about the idea of stereotypes. If our curriculum is lacking diversity with a range of role models, what happens when a young person cannot see someone who looks like, acts like, sounds like, feels like them? And what if they are not displaying the potential for being successful? Identity is important, and our curriculum planning, design and making needs to be cognizant of this, whichever stage our young person may be at. Industry versus inferiority. The importance of belonging and esteem needs. As Maslow's hierarchy of needs shows us, empowering our young people to be active partners in leading learning matters. In this task, use the Who Leads Learning handout to map out up to 9 different examples where learning is led in different ways. In working with your group, try to keep this open to interpretation. The task is intended to provoke discussion and debate. Questions to pose includes, what do we mean by leading learning? Do examples include individual learners and or groups of learners? Do examples reflect a range of learners? Are all learners given the opportunity to lead? Do examples cover the 4 curriculum contexts? It is key we remember our why here. Both Maslow's hierarchy of needs and Erikson's stages and the psychosocial development tells us that our young people need to be active partners in learning and feel and see that they are. Building on this, I would like to make more explicit the place of learner voice, learner agency, and learner leadership. These can sit out with our curriculum and learning and teaching, but they should be considered as a golden thread running through our schools. As illustrated, learner voice supports feedback and supports learner empowerment. However, learner agency supports responsibility and ownership. This will aid meeting learners' esteem needs and supporting learning and engagement. Pause the video to consider the quote from James Anderson, education consultant and author. The 3 elements provide a good framework to consider the ways in which learner agency should be considered within your school. This next slide also provides a useful framework for considering the degree of learner voice or agency within your school. You may wish to ask colleagues to revisit the examples in the Who Leads Learning task and ask the group to consider the balance of the examples they've identified. Is this weighted to teacher-centred, learner-centred, or learner-driven? As a school, where do you feel this should be? To recap, when considering your school's curriculum rationale, engagement with the whole school community, particularly learners, will support consideration as to what the curriculum should cover. This will need to take into account national policy. However, a curriculum that is meaningful to learners will lead to greater engagement and learning outcomes. Consideration of learners as co-creators will also support engagement and outcomes. Careful consideration of this based on your cohort, their individual stages and needs should inform this also. Mastery can be considered as a demonstration of secure learning. Consider the first task in this section. What do we do really well? Did you or any of your colleagues identify as a sense of accomplishment reinforced your motivation to learn? Think about times when you have seen a young person or a class experience the joy of accomplishment when they demonstrated mastery of a learning task, be it putting a basketball through the net, achieving their goal in the numeracy assessment, or meeting the success criteria of a history task. For young people, they feel this sense of accomplishment through gaming at times. We can all recognise this and see the value of this in developing motivation. As shared previously, learners learn best when their learning needs are being met. There's appropriate challenge and learning goals are achievable. The Education Endowment Foundation set out guidance to support schools to consider mastery within their curriculum. As we look ahead to the outcome of the curriculum improvement cycle, we need to consider both our current experiences and outcomes as well as planning for a revised framework. With greater clarity on the big ideas, schools can expect a clear guidance on what young people will need to master in their learning. At this point in time, we should therefore consider what this means for our curriculum planning. At the time of recording this, Scottish Education is going through the process of curriculum improvement cycle, and within this, a revision of the approach to curriculum design. Part of this discussion relates to the balance of skills and knowledge within the curriculum. Project-based learning has the potential for enriched learning experiences that support both the development of higher order thinking skills as well as knowledge. Pause the video to read this quote from Andreas Schleicher from the OECD. The PISA results are often seen as a key checkpoint for assessing knowledge within the curriculum by an international measure. Schleicher picks up on important considerations in this statement. Therefore, it is important to consider skills within mastery also. Skills are a fundamental component of learning. The example used here is the meta skills created by Skills Development Scotland and are used by many schools to support the language of skills. Alongside knowledge, the mastery of skills should form a key component of our curriculum rationale. Often more challenging to determine, this can present a wicked issue for schools. However, young people face an uncertain future, and one in which adaptation and the use of skills in new contexts will be key. It is therefore right that our learners have a clear understanding of skills, and our curriculum rationale and design take account of this. Use the challenge questions in the slide to help consider this. Working with your staff team, you may wish to use the questions above to explore mastery within your curriculum. You may also wish to adapt these to your own school-based curriculum and your local knowledge and feedback to date. So, to recap, there are three main ideas we have explored in this video. Firstly, the idea of liberating learning. This was to consider how our curriculum rationale reflects learners' learning needs and learning motivations. Igniting Joy asked us to consider how our curriculum takes account of our school community's values and what is important and relevant to them, with a focus on learners. It also asked us to consider the role of learners as leaders of learning and co-designers of curriculum. Finally, the importance of determining mastery, both in the value this brings to motivation and engagement, but also outcomes. This is both in the context of skills and knowledge. You'll remember that these videos have been created to support curriculum, rationale, design, and the making process. Created by Education Scotland, this diagram provides a framework for this, and this video has focused on understanding learners. However, we have also touched upon other topics, including know the big ideas and know your own learning and support needs. The process of rationale for curriculum leading to curriculum design and curriculum making that East Lothian are using is based on our Helsinki model. This is not a roadmap. We don't see this as a linear journey. Rather, it's more of a spaghetti junction, or at least a journey with lots of roundabouts and revisits to places we've already been, either to check that our aim was achieved or to re-look at this area from a different direction. Remember, Double Diamond is a process that asks us to revisit and reconsider as we move through its stages. As stated at the start of the video, these videos have been designed to accompany the resources available on the EduHub and are aimed at school leaders for professional learning. A version of this PowerPoint and all the others used in this series are ready for use with staff teams and can be downloaded and adapted for this purpose. In addition to this, the toolkit, our aspirational curricula, is available on the Curriculum Rationale, Design and Making landing page on the EduHub and contains support materials for schools to use. The 3 slides shown below relate to those supporting this part of the process. I hope you found this video useful. The next video in the series is Finding the Why of Curriculum Rationale Session 3. How do we turn what we have into what we need to get what we want?